was over, she came backstage and told us how good we were, and she would like to take us to Motown. And so
the recording company.
Right, so we went to Motown Recording Company, and Barry Gordy and all the staff, you know.
Michael Jackson's art and life proved that genius is childhood recaptured. Michael Jackson also reflected on his father's hard upbringing in the South, surrounded by an extended family, very hard work, and racism. I have started reflecting on the fact that my father grew up in the South, in a very poor family. He came of age during the Depression, and his own father, who struggled to feed his children, showed little affection towards his family and raised my father and his siblings with an iron fist. Who could have imagined what it was like to grow up a poor black man in the South, robbed of dignity, bereft of hope, struggling to become a man in a world that saw my father as a subordinate? I have begun to see that even my father's harshness was a kind of love, an imperfect love to be sure, but love nonetheless. He pushed me because he loved me, because he wanted no man ever to look down at his offspring. And now, with time, rather than bitterness, I feel blessing. In the place of anger, I have found absolution, and in the place of revenge, I have found reconciliation. And my initial fury has slowly given way to forgiveness. And that is why I want to forgive my father.
By the problems of the past. In a world filled with hate, we must still dare to hope. Keep hope alive. In a world filled with anger, we must still dare to comfort. In a world filled with despair, we must still dare to dream. In a world filled with distrust, we must still dare to believe. To all of
in a different place, in a different time, different.
Michael Jackson's most memorable film role came in the motion picture The Wiz. This was a musical known as an African-American version of The Wonderful Wizard of Oz by L. Frank Baum.
And good luck.
The original 1975 Broadway production won 7 Tony Awards, including Best Musical. The musical was an early example of Broadway's mainstream acceptance of works of an all-black cast. Motown Productions acquired the film rights to The Wiz in 1977 and signed Stephanie Mills in anticipation of having her star in the film adaptation. Motown singer and actress Diana Ross asked Motown CEO Barry Gordy to cast her as Dorothy instead, but Gordy declined, feeling that 33-year-old Ross was far too old for the part. However, Ross contacted Rob Cohen of Universal Pictures, who offered to have Universal finance the film if Ross were to play Dorothy, at which point Gordy acquiesced. Motown star Michael Jackson as the Scarecrow, Nipsey Russell as the Tin Man, Richard Pryor as the Wiz, and Lena Horne as Glinda the Good Witch. Ted Ross and Mabel King reprised their respective roles as the Cowardly Lion and Eveline from the Broadway production. Sidney Lumet served as director, working with screenwriter Joel Schumacher and music supervisor Quincy Jones.
Well, The Wiz was great because it was an off-take, an offshoot from The Wizard of Oz, except for it had a black flair to it. And The Wiz, you know, with all these great people, you know, Barry Gordy was executive producer for it, so it was kind of like a Motown production. And with Diana Ross, they thought she was too old for the part, you know, and she did an excellent job as Dorothy. But Michael, with the Scarecrow and how he just, you know, his body moved and he made it seem like there was no bones, because Scarecrows have no bones. And Michael singing ease on down the road, it was just fantastic. And the thing about The Wiz is where he met Quincy Jones. And, you know, they got to know each other during the taping of The Wiz, and with that, Quincy finally said, you know, I think you know, we can do some things together. And Michael said, well, could you produce my next album? And there you go. Off the Wall came first, and then after that, the absolute masterpiece of Thriller, even though I think Off the Wall was a masterpiece as well.
Just an embryo of a thought, of an idea. It could be just a brief concept, and then you collaborate with someone. It could be a writer, and you'll say, you know, I want to do this, and I want to do that, and I want to do this. You tell them to develop.
Jackson reunited with producer Quincy Jones to record his 6th studio album, The Thriller. The relationship between Jackson and Jones became strained during the album's recording. Jackson spent much of his time rehearsing the dance steps alone. In a candid interview, Larkin Arnold, the former VP of CBS Records, talks about the problems with releasing the best-selling album of all time.
Directive from the president, Dick Asher, that you never are supposed to release a single until the album is finished. He said, do not release any singles until you have the finished master of the album, you know, in your hands. You know. So that was the directive. And but when we were finishing the record, about to finish, you know, and Quincy said, well, listen, Larkin, I'd like to get this record out, you know, in time to take advantage of, you know, the Christmas opportunity, you know, to have it happening by that time. So, you know, why don't we go ahead and put out the single, you know. And I said, well, are you sure? He said, well, don't worry about it, you know, it's going to be finished, and it was right. So we released, I went ahead and I took the chance, you know, and I put out, you know, The Girl Is Mine, you know. That was the first single off that album. Because we had to do that because there was a backlash, you know, at this time against black music, you know, because the radio stations had stopped refusing to play black music. They felt that there was too much, you know, penetration of disco on their radio stations, too much women's lib in the music, you know, I Will Survive and all that stuff. So they had a rebellion against playing black music. And I don't know if you know that one time they had it in, I think in Wrigley Field, they, a couple of radio stations had taken all these disco records and radio and singles and stuff like that, and emptied them on the field in the baseball stadium, and then took a what's those big rollers, you know, construction rollers, and rolled over all the disco records and crushed them and everything, you know. And so they had just basically refused to stop playing black music on pop radio.
Jones and Jackson were determined to make a rock song that would appeal to all tastes. Spent weeks looking for a suitable guitarist with the song Beat It.
Twilight Night, that's what Thriller was called, Twilight. And they wanted something a little edgier and harder, and they came up with Thriller.
Eventually, they found Eddie Van Halen of the rock band Van Halen.
So that's what we were up against. So that's why we released, you know, the song with, because, you know, Sexual Healing had a hard time crossing up. I mean, they, even our pop department, even our white department didn't want to cross that record over. But the record was so big, you know, they couldn't stop it, you know.
When the album's 9 songs were completed, both Quincy Jones and Michael Jackson were unhappy with the result and remixed every song.
So we released that record, and I went over to hear the final mix of the album and basically, you know, get, you know, the situation, the masters of the completed album. And it didn't sound anything like some of the songs that I'd heard before when they had done the rough mixes. And the first mix, it's just absolutely horrible. I mean, it lost a lot of the brightness, the clarity, the rhythm, you know, it was just not there, you know. So Quincy said, no, I can't give you this record, Larkin. We got to do this all over again, you know. We got to send this, I got to remix all of these songs all over again. And I'm saying, oh my God, I said, you know, their albums, the singles out, you know, and if the single really takes off, and